Hi, this is Denise Wakeman from the Blog Squad, and with me here today is my friend and colleague, Dr. Rachna Jain, and I'm going to do a quick little interview with her because she is a specialist on the psychology of social media, and I thought that this would be a really important topic for you to learn about. So welcome, Rachna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Now, Rachna, I'd like it if you could give a little bit of like the nutshell version of your background so that my viewers can get a sense of why I'm talking to you about this topic.
Absolutely. So I'm trained as a clinical psychologist. I hold a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I worked for many years as a psychologist. So I did psychotherapy, I did assessment, and I began working online in 1998, and I used the internet, which is very different then, as you know, Denise, than it is now, but I used the internet to fill my practice, and people got really interested in how I was getting clients from the internet, and they would ask me questions about, how do you use the internet, how do you make connections with people, how do you get them to contact you, and I would give them all of the information, but they actually wanted me to start doing it for them, so I got into actually marketing for other service businesses. Then with the advent of social media, I began to see that social media really is a marketing channel that relies very heavily on psychology and sociology. And so I began studying how it is people are getting attention, how they're making connections, how they're making relationships, how social media is really changing our attention spans and the way we're interacting online. And so I put together some information that I think will be really helpful related to the psychology of social media and how you can use it to build your business and brand.
Excellent. So, we've been talking about this for the last few days that we've been hanging out here together in the Blog Squad headquarters.
Yes, which is super secret, and I'm really privileged to be able to see them for myself.
So why don't we first kind of set the stage here? Why does psychology matter, or why is it important in social marketing and specifically around building visibility online?
Absolutely. That's a really good question, because really the first question is, why do we care, right?
Right.
And the reason that we care is because psychology is really the study of the way that people perceive the world, the way that they interact with each other, the way they feel about themselves. And so it's really a study of kind of, in some ways, like the way we perceive our world and how we interact with it. Now, the thing is the social part of social media is really about interpersonal connection, how we communicate, how we share our ideas online. And so really having an understanding of psychology is key, because anytime you're dealing with people, the more you understand about how people think, why they think the way they do, the more that you can, what shall I say, tailor your message so that it actually has them pay attention to you, has them hear you, and that will help you increase your visibility. So I really see, understanding group dynamics, understanding communication styles, understanding attention. I'm trained, actually. I have a clinical specialization in neuropsychology, so I'm really interested in the brain and behavior, and I'm interested in how we grab attention, how we keep it, and that all completely relates to the concepts of online visibility.
Great. So is there any psychological research that supports this study that you're doing, or this interest that you have specifically in social marketing, so that or that we should be taking into consideration specifically?
Absolutely, there is. There are quite a few studies, but let me just give you a couple of them in the interest of keeping this not from being too long. One of the kind of most I'm going to say oldest, but it's actually kind of the longest term studies, and it really shows that it's a concept that people have been concerned about for a really long time. It comes from 1977, where a psychological researcher, Swap, actually studied a phenomenon that says that when people see you more, they like you more. The shorthand is that familiarity breeds likability, and the extra piece of that is that you become more likable the more that people see you, especially if you're seen as giving them value or giving them good content and information. Now we fast forward to 2010, and we see that that's really one of the cornerstones of successful social media, that we be seen everywhere and we give people a lot of value, so they ultimately are going to like us. And remember that people always choose to do business with people that they like. So your degree of visibility and your degree of likability directly will correlate with your degree of profitability.
Excellent. Now, we've been, again, talking about this over the course of a few days, and you mentioned something called priming. Can you talk about priming and what that means and how that relates to this?
Absolutely. Priming is another psychological concept that you can use to build visibility, or I call it influence, building influence online. And priming refers to the idea that people can be guided to think, behave, or feel certain ways based on information that they're given. So if we take it from a psychological perspective, a lot of the priming work has been done by John Barg. And what he's done is he's actually shown that he can change the way they walk, the way that they talk, what they talk about, by presenting different combinations of words and phrases and images and phrases. So for example, he did a study with college students, and they were all kind of young and vibrant coming into the clinical testing room, and then he showed them how he took video of how they came into the room. He sat them at computers, and then he showed them a lot of words and images that had to deal with being old, being infirm, and being in pain. So he showed like pictures of elderly people, he showed words like painful, he showed words like arthritis, things like that. And what he actually found is that every single one of those students left the room slower, walking differently, and complaining of pains or aches that they didn't mention prior to coming into the study. And there's a little bit more to it, but that'll give you kind of a sense that words and images are really powerful. So how this applies to you and your online visibility is it basically speaks to the idea that you can use the combination of words and phrases and images, your videos, all of your different marketing channels to create a feeling or a experience in the lives of the people who are watching you and in the lives of your audience. Now, most people don't think about this consciously. They kind of just put themselves out there and they say, well, however people perceive me is how I'm perceived. But that's actually ill-considered, and it's not really taking very good control of your persona or your reputation. So a better way is to take a step back and to be thinking about how it is you'd like to be perceived, and then making sure that you're using photos, images, words, phrases, video, audio, all the different channels that Denise talks about in order to present the image that you want to present, because you can actually impact how people think about you, how they feel about you, and then of course how they respond to you. And in business, it's whether they buy from you, work with you, or refer you to others.
So be careful what you're putting out there online, right?
Exactly, that's exactly right. Because Google doesn't forget. I mean, anything that you've put up online or anything that anyone said online, I'm very certain is archived somewhere. And so we really want to be very conscious and very careful about how we're putting ourselves out there, especially as the rate of information becomes more and more rapid. I mean, Denise, I know you've been working online for a long time, and you've seen how fast information is changing and how fast it's transmitted.
Yeah.
And there's some studies that say now that we get more messages in a day than our grandparents got in 10 years or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it really speaks to the accelerated rate of information. And so just really it's very important to think about how you want to present and be able to use the psychological concept of priming to your advantage.
So can you give a specific example of how you might use priming in a blog post, for example?
Absolutely. So one of the first things that you may do in a blog post is when people come to your site, think about how it is you want them to feel. Most of us, kind of the idea of this information superhighway is that we're running around stressed looking for information all the time. We don't have a lot of time. We want, data and information or whatever we're looking for. We want our questions answered really quickly. So you can use priming to your advantage by starting off by saying something like, I'm really glad you're here. You're going to get some really valuable information about XYZ, whatever my blog post is about. You can use images that convey that. If you want your reader to feel confident or empowered, you can use images that convey that. Be sure at the end also to explain to them, again, to remind them of what you taught them and what they can take away from it and how to implement it in their lives. Because really the idea is that you want to give them a frame, you want to give them a bookend. This is what you're going to learn. You tell them or teach them whatever you want to say, and then you want to remind them of what you told them and why it was so valuable. And what you would find is if you could be in the mind of your readers, they're going to walk away feeling like that was one of the most valuable blog posts that they ever read, simply because you did the bookending of saying it is really valuable, here's my really good content. And again, remember that this was so valuable and this is how you can use it. So that's a simple example of priming. But even then, the connections you share, the relationships you make online, who people see you with. We talk about it in terms of social proof. That, if you are hanging out with all of the top people in your industry, you're automatically seen as a top person as well. And that's another form of priming. It doesn't use necessarily words, it uses images, but people just tend to associate you with the other top players in your industry. And so that's part of the reason why everybody wants to take pictures with, the really well-known people like Denise in order to be connected to them and be seen as somehow related or valuable. Priming happens on so many different levels, and it happens all the time. You can use it also in your consultations with people, and I don't want to go too far on that. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that there's a reason why, if you look online, people say things like, this is really powerful information. You're getting it for free. Aren't you lucky? That's all priming in action.
Okay, great. All right, well, where can viewers learn more about you and your work with psychology and social media?
So I have a great audio interview I just did probably a week or two ago that I'd like to offer your readers or viewers if they're interested. You can access that at www.mindsharecorp.com/go/free audio. And so you can get that free audio at www.mindsharecorp.com/go/free audio.
Okay, and that's an interview about, it goes much further in depth about the psychology of social media.
It does. It's about building influence in social media. And so you're going to hear, a little bit about SWAP again. You'll hear about BARG, but there were definitely probably at least 5 or 7 other strategies that I talked about that you could implement right now to build more influence online.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much, Rachna, for being my guest today, and blog on.